It was VJ Day, as you know, in August. My wife's grandfather from Australia, Bert Roskia, Shalom Shmuel Dov, may his memory bear blessings. He was an Australian soldier in World War II, sent to Singapore, and was captured by the Japanese, and was interred in the Changi prisoner of war camp in Singapore. And I never met him. He passed away before I met my wife. But through my father-in-law, I've heard many stories about what happened to him and the other Australians and British and all the other allied prisoners of war in the hands of the Japanese. We don't need to go into it here. We know that the conditions were absolutely horrific. But my father-in-law actually showed me a couple of years ago when I was in Melbourne that he has in his possession an invitation for a shul. They actually built a shul in Changi prison called Ohel Yaakov. The British, Australian, and Dutch, and if there were any New Zealanders, I don't know, but the Jews that were there, they actually were allowed by the Japanese to build a little shul inside the prison. It was called Ohel Yaakov, and they would have Friday night services there. And this was their place of inspiration to go to in this absolute hellhole. They had a shul, and my father actually has somewhere in his possession on a scrap of paper with pencil, like the invitation to the Chanukah Sabayis, to the opening of this shul in a prison of war camp in Japan, which is actually incredible. I've been doing more research since, because I'm going to be speaking about this in Rosh Hashana. It's a bit sketchy. There's not much written about it. My wife's grandfather, Arthur, someone actually rebuilt the scale model of what the shul looked like. They got bamboo and different things. There was also the chapels. They had chapels for the Christians. The Japanese allowed them to have. The one thing they actually allowed was them to have practice of worship. So they had shuls, each shul, and they had churches. And the only reason I was thinking about it was because I saw that even though the war finished on VJ Day, I believe it was the 14th of August, it was a few days after the second atom bomb, the prisoners were only let free from Changi on the 5th of September, which was nearly a month after the end of the war. It took that amount of time for, I guess, the liberators to come to Singapore, and for the Japanese inside to actually realize that the war was over. And it was only on the 5th of September 1945 that they were released. And I looked it up and saw that the Hebrew date for that corresponded to the 27th of Elul. So literally 3 days before Rosh Hashana in 1945, my grandfather-in-law, my wife's grandfather, would have been released from Changi prison. And it got me thinking about being released from prison. And I want to give you this these source sheets. I hope I made 10, so I don't know how many there are here today, but it might be just enough. And I feel I may have some more in my bag. Pass one. It's one sheet of paper each. Yeah. You can share as well. Yes, it wasn't about that. They were just anti-allied. They were anti-allied. We know that, of course, because there was a yeshiva. There was a yeshiva in Kobe, Shanghai, and in Japan itself. So let's. I don't know if there's one share between two. I'm sorry. That's all I made 10, so I don't know if that's it. Oh, okay, is that right? Can I start, Toby? I'll start. So the Gemara in Rosh Hashana. If you take a look at the source, the Gemara in Rosh Hashana. I brought you both the Hebrew and the English, or the Aramaic, English in some cases, but it says the following, source A. Rabbi Eliezer says, there's a discussion in the Gemara between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua about Nisan and Tishrei, whether the creation of the world was in Nisan or in Tishrei. Ayin Sham, I look there for more intricate details of the discussion between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. But in this case, Rabbi Eliezer says, in Tishrei, Nivra ha'olam, the world was created. But Tishrei noldu avos, all the forefathers were born on Tishrei. In Tishrei.
On the first of Tishrei? No, it doesn't say that. It says in Tishrei.
In Tishrei. It doesn't say when in Tishrei, it says in Tishrei. Yeah. But Tishrei meisu avos, they all died during Tishrei as well. But Pesach nolad Yitzhak. So again, so Yitzhak stands apart from the other forefathers, that he was born in Pesach. Now, Rosh Hashana nifgeda Sarah Rachel Chana. Hannah and Rachel and Sarah, Sarah and Rachel were from the foremothers, but Hannah also one of the greatest Jewish women of history. They were remembered by Hashem on that day.
Hashem provided Sarah. Then 9 months later
is Yitzhak, exactly. Well, no, it wasn't 9 months, it was less than 9 months, I believe. Is it 6 months? He was born at 6 months. That's what it was. And so this was the day where they conceived. And that's why, as you all know, the famous Haftarah of the first day of Rosh Hashana is the Haftarah of Chana, which is a lot more to talk about that as well. Here we go. Next, this is the most important one for today. Rosh Hashana, Yatsa Yosef, the Beis HaAsurin. On Rosh Hashana, Yosef was taken out of the Beis HaAsurin from the prison on that day. It continues by saying, Rosh Hashana Batla Avoida Ma'avatenim Mitzrayim. On Rosh Hashana, the forefathers, they stopped having to do the work, the slavery to the Egyptians. And finally, it says, V'Nisan Nig'alu. In Nisan we were redeemed, but Tishrei Asidin Ligal. But in Tishrei itself, we will have the future redemption. And again, Rabbi Yeshua almost parallels this from the other end, and it says that many of the things that happened were actually in Nisan or Tishrei. I don't want to get into that now, it's too confusing. They both agree that on Rosh Hashana, that's the first day of Tishrei, Yosef was taken out of the Beis HaAsurin, from the prison. Now, we see from the Gemara that somehow we learned that Yosef was released from prison on Rosh Hashana. And it's something to think about. What does that mean for us, 2025? Firstly, I think it's important to note just where we're holding ourselves this year. Yosef wasn't in a prison like, in HMP Brixton, where they got, private toilets and what have you, right? When we talk about him being released, it's released from a bore. What's a bore? It's a hole in the ground. The way they would have dungeons in those days, they would literally get a pit, they would open it up, and they would throw people in there. No sanitation, no running water, no sunlight. Yosef wasn't a bore, it wasn't like a nice prison. It doesn't take much for us to think about this idea of Jews nowadays. As we sit here right now, we have fellow Jews that are sitting in something very similar, under the ground, maybe got something right, underground, in darkness, suffering. And we think about this on Rosh Hashanah, because you'll see in a minute that the implication is, as Rosh Hashanah enters, that night of Rosh Hashanah, the new year, Yosef is in a bore, is in hell. And the next afternoon, he is the ruler of Egypt. He goes to sleep on Rosh Hashanah night as in a hole in the ground, and he finishes the next day as the ruler of Egypt. It's an incredible thing to think about how fast and how quick the Geula, the redemption, comes for Yosef. And for us as well, we think about it. There was this. Was
the other way round? Things go wrong.
100%. That's true.
Yeah.
There was, what's his name? I think it was Eli Sharabi. I can't remember there was one of the hostages literally that was taken out of Gaza, and within a month he was in front of Trump in the Oval Office. I can't remember which one it was. I have to remember the name. But literally within a month, you go from being in a hole in Gaza to standing in the Oval Office with the president, talking to him. Just can you imagine such a turnaround? So it's something for us to think about and focus on our prayers this year, that we're davening so hard that it should be so quick, and the change should be so quick that those prisoners who are underground in these hellholes right now should be released and taken out.
That's the story
immediately.
Of life, actually. Things change
immediately,
very quickly.
100%.
All sorts of things.
Definitely. And now let's relate that a bit more into how we can focus in terms of our tefillah and Rosh Hashanah. Because this is where it gets interesting, and Claire already kind of alluded to this. We see that Pharaoh has a role to play in here, and the dreams that he had. But let's go back in time. Let's go back to the end of Parshas Vayeshev. Joseph's in the prison, and the butler and the baker, are in the prison with Joseph. And as you remember, he says, "Why do your faces look so down today?" And they answer by saying, "We had these dreams and we can't answer them. Can you answer them for us?" And Yosef is the one who answers those dreams for both the baker and the butler. Remember this? I don't think I need to explain. Everyone knows this. Everyone's seen Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. And this is on source C. This is what Yosef tells the Sarah Mashkim, the butler. And I'd like to thank Laurie for volunteering to read source C. Thank you, Laurie. In English, it's fine.
Pharaoh will pardon you and restore you to your post. You will place Pharaoh's cup with his hand, as was your custom formerly when you were his cupbearer. But think of me when all is well with you again. Do me the kindness of mentioning me to Pharaoh, so as to free me from this place. For in truth I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews. Nor have I done anything here that they should have put me in the dungeon.
Okay, and on this point, right, Yosef is at the end. He's saying, you're going to be released. You're going to be taken out of here. But just do me a favor, please have the kindness of mentioning me to Pharaoh. Can you please get me out of here? I need some help. Will you mention me? And source D, sadly, we see that the Sarah did not fulfill his end of the promise. As we see that it's literally the last psukim of the parasha of Vayeshev. He did not remember him, and not just that, he forgot about him. He's out of prison, the butler, and he's completely forgotten about Yosef. So Yosef's languishing. Vayhi miketz shnatayim shana, shnatayim yamim, and it was the next words in the Torah, and it was 2 years later. 2 years later. And this is what happens. Source F. Pharaoh has a dream. We learned, I saw in a few different places, it says that the word Miketz Shnatayim Yamim, again, it's implying that it was exactly 2 years later. So this means it was exactly 2 years after was when Yosef was released out of prison, which means you go back 2 years. Yosef's released from prison on Rosh Hashana. Exactly 2 years beforehand means that the conversation he's having with the Sarah Mashkim, with the butler and the baker, that conversation also was on Rosh Hashana. He had the conversation with them on Rosh Hashana. He said to them on Rosh Hashana, can you do me a favor, when you get out of here, can you just remind me to Pharaoh? Can you remember Pharaoh? Tell Pharaoh that there's a guy, there's an Israelite in prison. Can you please do that? Did Joseph do something wrong? Now we look at Joseph and we say, of course he didn't do something wrong. He did his shtadlus. He did what was meant to do. What else is he meant to do? He's stuck in prison. Of course he's going to ask people to help him out. There's a very harsh Rashi here. It's very difficult to read. It's one of the hardest in all of Rashi's explanations to get and understand this. But source E is very difficult. We have to read it. I'd like to thank some volunteer. Gary, thank you, Gary. Source E for volunteering.
Afterwards, because Joseph had placed his trust in him that he should remember him, he was doomed to remain in prison for 2 years. So it said, happy is the man who maketh the Lord his trust, and turneth not to the arrogant, i.e., doth not trust in the Egyptians who are called arrogant.
Okay.
Doth not trust.
It doth. Do not.
Doth not trust.
Some old translation. Okay. Doeth not or doth not. Whatever. Pasuk is Ashrei Gev Hashem Miftacho. Praise is the man who puts Hashem completely as his trust and doesn't put his trust in other people. Now again, we read this and it's a very tough thing to read because Yosef somehow had to get out of there. But on his level, Yosef had only one place to turn to and to put all his trust in, and it wasn't in the Sarah Mashkim, it was in Hashem. And with this we come.
That's why you can't rely on miracles. You can't rely on miracles. You have to do your.
You have to do Ishtadlus. But Yosef somehow on his level had to put all his trust only in Hashem and not anyone else. Look at source G and source. It is the Orach Chaim. The Orach Chaim is Rabbi Chaim Ben Attah. Have you ever learnt any of the Orach Chaim here before, Gary?
We've come across him many times.
Okay, good. Okay,
He's a big source.
Big source for you. Okay, fine. Look at this source, okay? In due course, Yosef was proven right, for ultimately the chief butler did recall him, and this started Joseph's dramatic rise to power. The reason Yosef was punished was because he imagined that his own advancement would depend on the goodwill of the chief butler. He thought, well, now I'm here, the only way I'm going to get out, I've told him, the only way I'm going to get out of here is if the butler actually does something about it, because now I've put all my trust in him. While God did use the chief butler as an instrument in advancing Joseph's fortune, the chief butler did not act voluntarily. He was prompted by fear to recall his days in jail, and Yosef had to be taught the lesson not to rely on man. Yosef was taught this lesson. Again, it's very tough for people on our level to be able to really swallow this, because we know that if we were Chas v'Shalom in a situation like that, we would do everything we can. We'd phone everybody, we'd phone every lawyer and every senator and every politician and do what we can, which isn't wrong. But on Yosef's level, when he said, the minute he said to the Sarah Mashkim, do me a favor, when you get out, you're getting out, right? You're getting out. So when you're out, please, can you now tell Pharaoh, he now put his trust in this guy, and that wasn't right. He had to put his trust completely in Hashem. Now, why is this relevant? Because what was the day that he told the Sarah Mashkim, can you please remember me to Pharaoh? It was Rosh Hashana. It was Rosh Hashana that he told him that. And we now bring this back together because it was 2 years later on Rosh Hashana that he was released from prison. But Hashem had to give him 2 years to make him realize this lesson, that he had to put his trust firmly and only in Hashem. And that was the only place he had to put his trust. And what does this tell us? It tells us that we stand this year in Shul on Rosh Hashana. And we're going to stand in front of the Creator. It's going to tell us 2 lessons. Number 1, going back to the original question, it tells us about the joy of this day, that people like Yosef can go from being in a pit to being the Lord of the land. That every single one of us, Hashem allows every single one of us in Rosh Hashanah to completely change the course of our lives. And that's another reason to celebrate. That's another reason to have the honey cake and the wine and to enjoy ourselves. Because it tells us that in Rosh Hashanah, it literally is a brand new day. It's a brand new start. You can go from wherever you were a few seconds before Rosh Hashanah started, everything can flip and change, just like it did for Yosef. You can go from someone who says, I can't do this, or I'm not able to, or it's totally locked up for me, I can't access it, or I've been so bad, I've been so wrong. Everything can change on Rosh Hashanah. As U2 famously said, everything changes on New Year's Day. Everything can flip around completely. That was a reference to a pop band from the 80s.
Is that fair?
That, you can switch everything around?
Yeah.
Excellent question. Is it fair that there is such a thing that everyone has to account for themselves?
Why is it not fair?
Because
I murdered you, right? And then it starts fresh the next week.
so there are, you have to look at, there are certain things you cannot, just wipe a straight king, like murder, for example, right? We're not talking about that.
You know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Again, and this what it really essentially says, if you've done certain Averas, Yom Kippur, and you look at the Rambam, Hilchos Tshuva, the beginning, if you want to see, it's very interesting. The whole beginning of Hilchos Tshuva, the Rambam goes into this in great detail about like all the things you've done wrong, how you get fixed them. But if you want to, you can. And Rosh Hashanah allows you the chance to almost wipe the slate clean. Things can change. As you said yourself, it happens so fast. It happens so quickly. Look at the way the world is right now, and the way that Israel is perceived right now. And I saw this morning about the Emmys last night, and all the people with the kafirs, and like we are literally hated right now. We are hated, and it's a crazy thing for us as Jews. We've been for so long. Every human being, I like to think every healthy human being likes to be loved. We like to be liked. Let's be honest. Come on, everyone here wants to be liked, and we want to be liked as Jews as well. We want people to like us as Jews. But the way the world is right now, we are hated because we're Jews. Israel's a pariah state. We are pariah people, and if we link ourselves to Israel, it means that we are, by virtue of our linking to Israel, we are pariah people. We are supporters of genocide. We are supporters of killing babies, and we are hated in the world today, right now. And it's absolutely sickening. We saw in the Parsha just now, Parsha Nitzavim, Parshas Kisavo, the beginning of Parshas Kisavo, it says about the Egyptians. One of the things it says there is. It says there that they made us turn bad. What was it again? Remind me, Toby? No. It says there that one of the Egyptians did to us. They made us bad. They made us into bad people. Here we are. It's here. Here we are. It's coming up right now. Parshas Kisavo. Here we go. Right.
He didn't lend his shovel, so he's off the hook.
Okay. Here we are. Look. It says here. We went down to Egypt. Vayareu osanu Mitzrim. Vayanunu vaydu aleinu avodah kasha. Vayareu osanu means that they caused us to be like bad. They gave because of their oppression, and that's the worst thing in the world, is that we know as Jews we are gomli chasadim. We love chesed. We are people who know what it means to be modest at our root. We are people who are gomli chasadim. We are baishanim. We are people we know. At root, we are people who want good and who are looking out for good constantly. But the world has now seen us as the complete opposite, and we are hated amongst the nations. But it can all change in one day. It can all change in one day. That's what this tells us. We could go on Rosh Hashana, everything could flip, and the world could love us again in 1 second. Nothing is said. It's highly unlikely, but these things tell us and teach us that like things can just completely change in an instant. And that's one of the reasons we can celebrate. But I want to bring it even more. This tells us something even greater, is that when we stand there on Rosh Hashanah this year, what was Joseph punished for is that he obviously believed in God and he trusted Hashem. But the minute he said to Sarah Mashkim, "Can you go and tell him?" Then now he put his trust in the butler, that the butler will do his job. And the Orach Chaim is telling us, no, even though he did his istadlus, there's only one address. There's only one address that we have to go to, really in sincerity, that with all our hopes and with all our fears and all our requests, and that's Hashem. And that's Hashem. And that's what Rosh Hashana is all about. Coming up on this day, the day that Yosef went out of prison, coming up in front of Hashem and realizing that ultimately He is the one and the only address for all our address. People think it's because of Trump, and maybe if we have a different prime minister, if it wasn't Keir Starmer in power, and if we had there's no one else, unfortunately, right? That's the problem. There's no one else, right? But if it was the case that we'd have won the election, and this one be in power, then really it would be okay, because then they would have supported Israel. And if this happens and that happens, if Netanyahu gets in here, then everything which... It's just Hashem is in control of the world, and on that day, Rosh Hashanah, you have to take a stop. Just think about that. Like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as you said, Laurie, you're the Melech. You're in control. You have a plan. It doesn't always seem right. It doesn't always seem great. I don't understand it. Help me understand it. Help me to live the life I can do. How I can plug in and live a life where I am aligned to your Malchus, aligned to your kingship. And that's all I can do on Rosh Hashanah. I can make you my king and understand that you are king of the world. That is what Rosh Hashanah is all about. And with that, I want to finish by saying that this allows us to come out of our own prisons. Every one of us can come out of our own prisons on Rosh Hashanah. What does that mean? We are held back. We are held back the whole year round. We're held back by pessimism. We're held back by our own history of whatever happened in our lives. We're held back by cynicism. We're held back by so many things. The blocks and barriers that cause us to not be able to turn around to Hashem and be able to come with a contrite heart and the real heart to really be able to make that connection. The Yetzer Hara is very strong. The Yetzer Hara is very powerful. The Yetzer Hara has a myriad sources of whatever. It's got lots of power to put us in prison for the whole year. And with that, I'm not going to go through the whole quote here from Sefer Tanya in chapter 31, the Alter Rebbe of Chabad. And I actually was when I was learning through Tanya, I found this to be such a powerful paragraph that I even printed out and put in front of my siddur just to remind me of this. I apologize if some of these words are strong, and again, the Alter Rebbe speaking in the late 1700s, early 1800s, but I think that it's an amazing thing to remind us. The Alter Rebbe says, he's talking in that chapter about attaining true joy, and that joy comes oftentimes from what's called cheshbon nefesh, looking into your life, finding what's been right and what's been wrong. And a person can turn around and say, and this is the inverted commas in the speech marks, truly without doubt I am far removed from God. Yes, I look at my life, I'm so far away, I don't do what I'm meant to do, and I'm so cynical and so pessimistic. I'm so far away from you, Hashem. How can I stand in front of you, Rosh Hashana? How can I do this? I can't. I'm joking, I'm lying. I'm so far away from you. I'm abominable and loathsome. Okay, that's the Alter Rebbe's words, very strong, and so on. Yet this is myself alone. That is to say, the body with its vivifying soul. Yet there is within me a veritable part of God which is found even the most worthless of the worthless, namely the divine soul with a spark of veritable godliness which is clothed in it and animates it. For those who've learned the Tanya will know it talks very much at the beginning. We call the Chelek Eloka Mimal Mamash. This is a veritable spark of the divine inside every single one of us, aka your soul. It's a spark of the divine. It's what animates you. Except that it is, as it were, in a state of exile. It's in prison. Throughout the year, your soul goes into like a prison cell. And your body and your physical needs somehow is the jailer and puts us in jail for the year. Therefore, on the contrary, the further I'm separated from Hashem and the more contemptible and loathsome, the deeper in exile is my divine soul, and the more greatly is she to be pitied. Therefore, says the Rebbe, I shall make it my whole aim and desire to extricate her, to pull my soul out of the dungeon, to get that Yosef out of prison, and liberate her from her exile, to take my neshama out of prison this year, in order to return her to her father's house, as in her youth. That's an expression we see, the Nureh Beis Aviha, take her back to her father's house, i.e. to take the soul back to where it really belongs, in a state of connection with the Creator, where it doesn't feel guilty and feel wrong and feel but really feels aligned with Hashem. Before she was clothed in my body, and when she was absorbed in His light, blessed be He, and completely united with Him. Now she will again be thus absorbed and united with Him, blessed be He. Okay, we got to leave it at that for the moment. But the idea is that on Rosh Hashana, we can take our Yosef out of prison. Our Yosef goes into prison for a year. That spark within that gets caked over, like I say, is the older we get and the harder it is, and the longer we live, there are more and more reasons to be cynical. But Rosh Hashanah, somehow everything starts again. The reset button gets started again, and we have the power on this day to take Yosef out of prison, take ourselves out of prison. So no matter what happens, we can, through our choices, start again, go again, start anew, ask for a new relationship, ask for a new connection, ask to be inspired, ask to find new ways to come home. And that is taking Yosef out of prison. So just to summarize, we asked the question, why does the Torah say that it's a time to celebrate, even though we should be scared? So we gave the answer, the few answers in the room. I gave the answer that actually it's the celebration, that we count, that we are, what we do matters. Then we brought in the whole question about Yosef being released from prison. And we learned from this that essentially Yosef put his trust totally, it seems, in the jailer, when really, even though he did his ishtadlus, it was the right thing. He should have said, the jailer's doing his thing, but still my trust is only in Hashem. And Rosh Hashanah is the day where we have to turn, no matter what's political, this, that, and the other, on Rosh Hashanah is just turning to the one above and asking the one above for help. And last but not least, to ask the Creator for help to get our Joseph out of its own prison, to get ourselves back for a good year, a year of connection where we can be hopefully shining examples and lights to each other. We've only got each other, right? At the moment, the world's not really listening. So we've got each other. Let's be good to each other. Let's, these as Jews, let's be good Jews to each other. Let's be good brothers and sisters to each other, because that way at least we can at least be shining within our own nation. L'chaim, and have a good year. Shana tova. Come on, Chatima tova to everyone.
How long was Joseph in prison before him?